and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host, and I'm joined, as always, by the guy who paints me like one of his French girls. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
It's my favorite thing to do. Canvas after canvas of you.
Just a really weirdly obsessive amount of them, actually.
Yeah.
Just like we've been meaning to talk to you about that, actually. It's getting weird.
I'm not open to that conversation.
This week on the show, it is time for another one of our patron-produced episodes. We haven't done one of these in a long time, but we are back with another patron-produced episode. In this episode, folks that pledge to us at the highest level, the Supreme Leader Doof level or higher on our Patreon account, that's patreon.com/doofmedia, get the privilege of selecting a movie for us to do a whole show on. And this time, our patron Chris P has asked us to take a look at the 2019 French romance film Portrait of a Lady on Fire. So that's the movie we're going to be talking about today. It's going to be a full spoilers conversation about that movie. So head on out to Hulu and watch it, and then join us for the show.
Yeah.
But Matt, after we do that, we have some news to talk about. We got to talk about, the usual Doofcast news, the streaming service woes, and the ongoing labor negotiations in Hollywood. We got to talk about all of it.
It really is a fascinatingly turbulent era of film and TV and media history, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And, I feel like every single generation that has existed in the world has, since movies have become a thing, has said, this is the end of the industry as we know it. And they've all been wrong until now.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we will. But first, let's get into our main topic of the night. Let's talk all about Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Matt, what is this movie all about?
On an isolated island in Brittany at the end of the 18th century, a female painter is obliged to paint a wedding portrait of a young woman.
This movie was written and directed by Céline Sciamma, starring Naomi Merlan and Adèle Haenel. I can't speak French. Apologies. That was brutal. This is as you said, a French movie. It's an extremely French movie in, I think, all the best ways. I had seen this movie before, so I think Matt, what we should say is this is not. We're taking a break from our Blind Spot series to do this because we owed this to our patron. But this is a movie that's actually on the BFI list that we picked our blind spots from. So I would have probably picked it had I not already seen it. So I had seen this movie before we talked about it on the show, but I probably would have picked it because I heard such wonderful things about it, which is why I went on and watched it a few years ago. But I want to know, what did you think of Portrait of a Lady on Fire?
It's great. I can see why it's on that list. It's one of those, deliberately paced, soulful, introspective movies that studies, basically two characters. You can kind of stretch it to as many as four, right?
Mm-hmm.
but a very small number of characters that we go very deep on. The movie hinges on the ability of these two actors, our central actors, to convey extremely subtle and complex evolutions of emotion. I'm thinking specifically about the scene where she's painted the first portrait of the woman,
Mm-hmm.
and shows it to her, and they're both aware that it's like inadequate, and it's such a great scene because you buy it, right? It's like there's nothing technically wrong with the portrait. It's just like it's not the right expression. It's an expression that she would never make. This is not the way she looks. This is not the way she is. It doesn't capture her personality. It's a perfectly serviceable portrait of like that woman's face, but she wouldn't make that expression. That doesn't capture her soul. And the funny thing is, like, as ephemeral as that is as an idea, the movie totally sells the idea that both of the women are like, that it doesn't capture it. It's not right, and they destroy it and start over. I thought that was, and like that only works because you feel like these characters so well. But by that point in the movie, that was kind of almost like a hinge point of the movie, and so I wanted to maybe start there with my reaction.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I love this movie so much. I really do. Like, I think it is incredibly powerful. I'm really like, I don't know if you noticed this. You might have. This movie has like no music in it at all. Um, until the last 2.5 minutes where Vivaldi shows up at the very end, and of
Mm.
course, I think the moment where we see one of the women play that Vivaldi piece on the piano, and then there's some I think some Latin chanting from some women in the background. But other than that, there's no score to this movie. It is just silence. It is just kind of, and we've talked so much about how music is kind of a cheat code in allowing you to figure out how you're supposed to feel about a certain scene or a certain moment or something like that. And for this movie to be like, well, we're not going to give you that, right? We're going to trust and rely on the fact that these performances and the way the camera moves and the way the actors move and the emotions almost create a soundtrack to this film. And I think that works really well. There is something incredibly powerful about the way this movie is shot to me. The wild thing about us covering this movie right now is I think it reminds me so much of some of the other movies we've covered on Blind Spots. I mean, the portion of the movie in which the woman shows up at this island, and is kind of like brand new and like thrown into the water almost to show up there. It's like, oh, this is the piano, exactly.
Yeah.
And then of course we just talked about In the Mood for Love, which is a story of these two people incredibly in love with each other, but it's a doomed romance, and I think that slots right into this kind of movie as well. But I think the Barry Lyndon of this really spoke to me as well, in which you can tell the director set up this movie so that so many compositions and scenes were created to be like a painting, to like just the way where she puts the camera, where everything's positioned, the lighting, all this stuff just felt like, oh, that's a painting, that's a painting, that's a painting, all these moments were there, and that was incredibly powerful to me. And I think gets across a lot of the emotion and just this composition, just that lighting, that music that they can't rely on music for.
Yeah, I love all that. I honestly didn't consciously notice that there was very little to no music, but now that you pointed out, I'm kind of going back through the movie and realizing how, despite the fact there was no music, I think sound was used very effectively.
Yep.
You could often hear very subtle sounds like changes in someone's breathing, which you would you would pick up on in the same way that you would pick up on it if that person were in the room. Often they go outside and they're near the surf, and
Yep.
the loudness of the surf, it almost takes the role of music. Those are usually very dramatic moments in the movie whenever they go outside to the water, and so I feel like the sound is being used in this very controlled way, but it's very spare, it's very minimal, but it is intentional, it is controlled, and it is having an impact on your emotional interpretation of what's happening. That's just so interesting. And yeah, the painterliness of the visuals. I think a lot that I noticed had to do with the I guess costuming, for lack of a better word. Like everyone's garb is like beautiful. Even like the maid is it's just like a shot of the maid like embroidering or something. It could be a painting, right? And it's just everything about the her sitting at the kitchen table embroidering with like the kitchen and fireplace behind her and everything. It's beautiful. It's picturesque.
Yeah.
Everything always is. That's totally true. Yeah.
I mean, and some of the most powerful shots to me are like that. Like we have to talk about this maid character, who's really interesting, because as you said, this is essentially a 2-part play that is about these two women, meeting each other, falling in love, and then of course having to leave each other forever, basically. But then we do have this third character, this maid, who's kind of with them going through her own stuff. She's pregnant, she's getting an abortion. I think one of the most just incredibly emotionally impacting scenes to me is when she's laying down on the bed, like getting the abortion, and there's a child. The director puts the child of the woman performing the abortion in the bed next to her, and is kind of like messing with her and like in a way kind of comforting her, right? And at this fascinating juxtaposition between a woman who is getting rid of her pregnancy next to what the result of that pregnancy could be. Was just like just an incredibly powerful moment to me, where I was like, holy shit, this is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I like that moment visually and emotionally. I was trying to I think I have so far totally failed to really understand the sort of higher level thematic message of the film. And I'm not, part of it is because I haven't had much time to really process it. I just watched it this week, hadn't watched it before. Um, but it's, you've got these two women who fall in love. You've got the idea that one of them is arranged, is I guess, fated to be married to some guy she's never met, in a marriage arranged by her mom. Her sister, her older sister, who was supposed to marry the guy, literally killed herself so she wouldn't have to get married.
Mm-hmm.
You've got this young maid who is pregnant, who is getting an abortion. You've got, the painter who, I guess we get some hints as to her own backstory.
Yeah, she's in an industry that is heavily dominated by men that she is really not invited to be part of, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
like the only reason she's here doing this portrait is because the woman knew her father, and I think like they're not allowed to paint men, right? I think that
Well, they're not allowed to paint nude men, yeah. So
yeah,
they
they're not
don't,
allowed to paint nude men.
but she does
And
anyway.
yeah, she of course she does anything she wants, and like she at the very end of the movie we see she has like a showing, but she lies and says it's her father's painting. Like this is woman that is in this man's world, and this man's industry, and has very little power for herself, but she's staking her claim anyway.
Yeah,
Awesomely, like she's a very very powerful character. I really like her a whole
yeah,
lot. Just her presence, that this actress is so good. Like she just has this commanding controlled presence, and then we get to see the ways in which Eloise like breaks that down, because she's so certain of herself
yeah,
at times, and Eloise just kind of knocks the air out of her.
yeah. So yeah, all of that, that's kind of, I strung all those things together because I was kind of gesturing at a giant pinata full of gender stuff,
Yeah,
and women's issues, and I don't know exactly what line to draw through it. Maybe it'll click into place. I mean, on one level, I feel like maybe I'm being dense, and it's just like it's just a love story between these two women who are in this patriarchal world where neither of them can really control their fate or have the life that they would want, and that's and it's as simple as that, and that's fine.
yeah.
That could just be it. I'm just
I really think that's it. Like I really don't think this is a story that has like a lot of like this sounds mean, but it's not like the complex metaphor. Like this is we're telling this story to tell you this larger story of the human experience or something. I think it's just specific to be like, let's talk about love, and let's talk about like this is a story in which we get to witness these two people fall in love. We get to see them meet, see their initial attractions to each other, see how that blossoms into something, see how that blossoming becomes all consuming in a way, and then witness it as it completely dominates their life, despite the fact that they aren't together anymore, and
yeah.
are never together,
And
and the tragedy in that. And I think that does line up into the powerlessness of women, like we see, and kind of this like, for lack of a better phrase, secret underworld of women that has to exist.
uh-huh.
Like the really interesting thing to me is that I think there's like one man in this movie,
Uh-huh.
like, and it's the guy who comes to pick up the painting at the
Yeah.
very end.
I guess other than the guys on the rowboat at the beginning, yeah, I
Yeah,
think you're right.
yeah, true. And there, I think there are some in the gallery at the
Yeah,
very very end. But
true.
yeah, in essence, there's like this is basically an island of women
Yeah,
essentially. There's no men about, and they're kind of having to do things, like they have to get the abortion in secret. Like there's this like secret meeting of women on the beach to have like to party and like to sing, and just like it's just like this underworld that must exist under everything.
uh-huh.
And that's where this movie takes place.
That's true. Yeah, no, that I almost forgot about the scene where, um, they go take dissociative drugs together, and
Mhm.
it's which is, if I'm not mistaken, is essentially like witch coded because this is something I learned from Twitter. So that's the confidence that you should put on the following that I'm going to say. But I
Okay.
read this very educational Twitter thread about how like uh, the the legends of like lycanthropy and like witches flying on brooms. It was because women and men, but you know, very often women would take these dissociative drugs in the form of some plant that they would rub on their bodies, and then they would have a dissociative episode where they really thought that they were flying around in the sky, or really thought that they turned into an animal of some kind. Like they hallucinated that this was happening, and then maybe they would like insist that it had happened later, and then that's where some of these stories got started. Could be total bullshit. The point is, the idea that you have this, you know, coven, if you will, of women meeting around this fire to do eerie chants and then swap drugs was it struck me as touching upon this idea of like women and sort of the witchiness of the idea of, or at least how I guess you could say how men perceive it to be witchiness, when really it's just like women have their own, you know, culture, or had their own culture back in those times.
Yeah, and we're not allowed to do that in the company of men. Like
Yeah,
they had to go off on their own and do these things. And yeah, I mean, one of the things I like most about it is, you know, we have this trio of characters. We have this you know, I don't want to call like a painter blue collar worker, because like she's an artist, but like kind of, right? Like she's doing like this work like this, where just come in and paint someone for this wedding photo, because, you know, back before cameras existed, if you wanted to marry someone that lived far away, you're like, well, I need to know what she looks like.
right.
Paint me a picture.
Yeah. I mean, she seemed to be certainly lower class than the family that she was painting for, but probably not
Yes.
like
Yeah.
genuinely low class, is
Right.
my
Yeah.
understanding.
Like probably middle class, I would say. And then of course the woman is a little bit higher class, and then the maid is the lowest class of the three
Yeah.
of them there, right? And yet when they're all three of them together, like they are essentially equal. And at least they treat each other as equal, or the movie treats them as if they treat each other as equal. And like that is something specific to them in this moment, this trio of them, that is really interesting. You know, you get the kind of the feeling that that doesn't happen when her mom's around or when other people are around. It's something specific to, oh, mom's left, and all the men are mysteriously
Yeah.
not here, and so we get to do things as if we would want to do them. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what that section of the movie is about, is the three of them just kind of hanging out. You know, they're reading stories, they're playing cards, like, and of
Yeah.
course the attraction between the two women, you know, are mixed in with this trio of women hanging out. But that the hanging out part of this, I think, is hugely important too.
Yeah, it is yeah, a lot of the movie is them just hanging out, you're right.
Hmm.
Yeah, it really struck me when she finally leaves at the end and she hugs the mother, and the mother, you know, the mother's reaction is basically like shocked at the impropriety of this painter hugging her.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
it's just like that's the hug is kind of from the place of openness and sort of camaraderie that they've all been experiencing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Well, and she hugs the mother to get like to get
yeah.
a look at the daughter, right? Like she's like
So
this
yeah,
is the
so
way I can hug you while looking at your daughter for the
and
last time. I can
yeah, I
look
mean,
at
I sort of
Eloise.
took it as she wants to hug Eloise, and so
Yeah.
she hugs her mom first, and then hugs
Hmm.
her to make it like yeah,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's so many moments in this. Like, you know, we already kind of talked about the Vivaldi moment that caps the film, you know, which is set up an earlier moment where Marianne is playing on the piano, and you know, this is her favorite piece, she says, and she plays that little bit from Vivaldi's Four Seasons. And then of course we see years later that Eloise is going to listen to this piece and is incredibly moved by it. That scene, by the way, that goes on for 2.5 minutes and is just a hold on that actress's face as she experiences every single emotion
Uh-huh.
that a human being has, like, and she has to communicate that all, you know, without any dialogue, just her reaction to the music, like happiness, longing, nostalgia, like just incredible heartbreak. She goes through the entire gamut while listening to this beautiful piece of music, and I just can't get enough of it. Like, since I watched this movie, sometimes I will just pull up that scene and watch it again, which I don't do very often
Uh-huh.
with the movies, but like I just am absolutely enthralled by that sequence. It's just such a display of, as you've dubbed it, face acting,
Yeah.
that I love so much.
Yeah, I love that scene too. I love another moment of face acting that I love, and you sort of pointing out that there wasn't any music to it makes me even more impressed. Was when she finds the portrait, the other portrait, the second portrait of Eloise in the
Mhm.
gallery, and you see, first she just kind of appreciates it and is kind of caught in the reverie, and then she sees that she's holding the book, and she's got her finger sort of holding her place in the book, and it's
Yeah.
clearly,
You see the page it is, which is the page. Yeah. Oh, it's
yeah,
perfect.
yeah, and you see her reaction to it, and that actually kind of it got me in that way that a movie can every once in a while, where you feel the emotion in your body. Usually you have to use music to really amp up a moment like that, or at least people usually do use music
Mhm,
in a
mhm.
moment like that. So just yeah, but all it took in this case was seeing her emotional reaction to it. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot. Like, I think I one lesson I learned from the movie overall is that both of these women are very stoic. Like the way they play the characters is very, very reserved and sort of aloof, like 95% of the time.
Sure.
Um, and then when, like, the moment when the painter Marianne finally just like collapses and is sobbing and begging her to forgive her, um it hits so much harder than it otherwise would, because she's been so reserved up until this point. So the playing with that line between stoic, reserved character and then letting the character go all out in the moment where it really calls for it really
Yeah.
paid off here.
There's something, I mean, it's really great because there's something inherently relatable to the idea of like crushing on someone and you're not sure if they feel the same way, and so you're trying to play it straight. And this movie, creates this opportunity in this crush of she's here to do a job, that is studying this woman and learning her expressions and her features and everything to be able to paint her, right. And she's got to do it from memory because she's doing it in secret at the beginning. And so the first little bit of this movie is Marianne like intensely studying this person, studying her face, studying her body, like and so it's like the like the attraction is all there, and everything's there, and there's always an excuse for it. And like it's just a really cool setup that allows you to have these moments where you can just like watch these women intensely watch each other, like intensely study each other. And so like it really does capture this, like I'm trying to look for clues about if this person's into me or not, like.
Yeah.
And like that's, I mean, that's a stressful and difficult situation, for us straight folks, around other straight folk. Like, can't imagine in a situation where like, does she even like women that,
Right.
like you just like, I just can't imagine the added level of stress of
Yeah.
playing that does she or doesn't she game, in this situation,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think
Exactly.
that's where that stoicism comes from, is they're really kind of feeling each other out for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and the movie really takes its time with that. I think it needs to. I think it would be much lesser if it kind of rushed past that period
Mhm.
of intensity. Because yeah, that's the vicarious, buy-in that we're getting is exactly what you said. The tension of will they, won't they, and not only just straight will they, won't they, but a is this going to blow up horribly?
Yeah.
Because you could imagine, especially in this period of history, if one of them were to, make an overture and then it's like, nope, nope, straight, then that could be pretty bad.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, that's something I was thinking about. Yeah.
It,
So,
saying that reminds me of something I really do appreciate about this movie, is that it doesn't really blow up. And I think this is another thing that it has in common with In the Mood for Love, that
mhm,
this idea of like their affair doesn't have any like consequences in the world around them, right? Like it's not like they get caught or anything.
right.
It just gets to the place where all the characters knew it was going to get to eventually, which is it has to end because they don't live in a world in which this thing could ever be possible for either of them. And so it ends, and that's it. And like, you would think if you're like in a screenwriting 101 course, like someone would be like, that don't do that. That's awful. That's
Yeah.
boring. What do you mean
Yeah.
nothing happens?
How anticlimactic, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that's part of the point, right? That's part of the whole thing. And I love it. I love that last moment. I love the reference to Eurydice and Orpheus, the moment at the end where she tells her to turn around. She turns around and then bam, like that's just it's beautiful. That's beautiful. It's this wonderfully crafted payoff that I can't get enough of.
Yeah, me too. I love the portrayal of sort of the ephemerality of love, I guess, or at least in this particular case, or how love can be ephemeral, maybe you should say, because there's the scene where Marianne is basically saying, I'm judging you for being willing to just go off and get married to this guy when I love you. And then Eloise is like, so are you asking me not to? And Marianne says, no, I'm not. And it's great because it's like, you and all the characters in the scene are aware of sort of the hypocrisy and contradiction of that, but also it's understandable. It's understandable on all sides of this doomed situation, that people would feel that way.
Yeah.
And then when they let it go, they really do let it go. I mean, and again, I agree with you. I love the or Eurydice's like comparison and the the motif of that threaded throughout the movie. Yeah. And part of me was thinking, as the movie ends, like, oh, she sees her again in the symphony, why doesn't she go talk to her? And it's like, of course you've got that part of you who says, go talk to her, go rekindle this thing. It's it's possible. It's true love. And but then it's like, and then where does that go?
Yeah. To what end? Yeah.
Like maybe it's better if you just have this beautiful romantic story that you get to carry in your heart for the rest of your days. And there's no way that going and talking to her right now is going to do anything other than fundamentally tarnish what that was. So
yeah. Well, that's the Orpheus and Eurydice of it all, right? Like that question they ask each other is like, why would he turn around? Why would he turn around? He was specifically told not to turn around, and turning around loses her forever. And the answer that Marianne comes up with is well, he chose the poet's life of that, exactly that, is that you get this perfect memory of this love that was probably doomed anyway. And that's what she does at the end. And so they could never be together. They're separated forever. Like that's the way it works in the myth, and that's the way it works here. But they get like it is so great that the movie at least gives her this thing of, yes, but she still loves you and thinks about you constantly and misses you. And like, 'cause I agree with you said, like the idea of love as this ephemeral thing is so perfect. But I think in the story, their love is both ephemeral and eternal at the same time. Like it's short lasting in they're able to, their ability to actually like express it physically and mentally with each other. But they also clearly have not gotten over each other, and I think the movie posits will never get over each other.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably primed on In the Mood for Love, obviously, but I think both films do have this thing in common, where it's this romantic view where like almost like having this tragic story of doomed eternal love to carry with you is probably better than if you had actually like tried to like hold on to this thing that was always impossible for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah. I mean, that's the tragedy of the story, right? Is that like there's no world in which these two women could actually be together, right? There's just no, like, not in this time, not in this place, like it's just impossible. And so like the idea of, we had this time together, we were on this magic island, that we got to be together this short amount of time, and we get to think about it and have it for the rest of our lives. I think absolutely. And we see that through both of them. We see that through Eloise going to see Vivaldi and being incredibly moved by it, and we see it by Marianne painting our titular painting, right? The portrait of a lady on fire, which, by the way, I think my favorite thing about it is it's not like a portrait, right? Like the painting isn't actually a quote unquote portrait. It's like the lady on fire, the Eloise with her dress on fire from the memory of that night where they got super high together. Is like she's small in the painting. Like you wouldn't describe that as a portrait at all.
No, it's a sort of impressionistic sort of. Actually, I don't know the right art words for these things, but it's not a portrait. You are correct. I almost wonder, like, what? There's got to be a name for that sort of specific thing where it's like metaphor, visual metaphor. But I don't know. Yeah.
I love it though. I love the like that moment where they both look at each other across the fire. Like that's the moment where they finally can go, oh, we do dig each other. Hooray.
Yeah.
And she also happens to be lit on fire at that moment, which is just perfectly poetic and wonderful.
It's great. Yeah. So you'd watched it. This is the second time you watched it. I didn't, not only did I not know, not only had I not watched it, but I didn't even know that this was a love story between two women and that they were going to fall in love. Like I, for all I know, this was some other kind of movie entirely. So I really was like on the edge of my seat with the like, okay, where are we going with this? Like, I think I know, like,
sure.
I'm pretty sure I know, increasingly sure as we go along. But, that was, I think that was a fun way for me to go into it. Actually, like, I'm glad that I knew nothing about the movie.
Yeah, I think that is one of those things that I have only really been able to capture at like film festivals, is this walking into a movie with literal no idea what you're about to sit down for. Because most of the movies I see are because I've read something about them or heard something about them already. So even if I haven't seen the trailer yet, I kind of know the general shape of what this thing is before going into it. So I did know that going into this movie. But I don't think it lessened my enjoyment of it at all.
Sure. Can I just say it's very fun to just watch a painting come together over the course of a couple hours? That's just a inherently pleasurable thing to watch happen
I so appreciate that the director took the time to have those painting sequences where we're just kind of watching her paint. And by the way, that's the actress's arm. They're not doing the that's actually Jim Cameron drawing the picture there. No, that's the actress. She was not really trained in painting, and she learned in order to be able to paint this stuff.
Okay, that's cool.
I thought that was really cool. And yeah, it's great seeing like her. I don't know. I get really nerdy about this stuff where like the way we see her brush strokes and like the slight hesitation in one moment and certainty in another moment, like the metaphor between trying to paint a picture and trying to feel out a person and learn a person, I think is right there, right? Like like sometimes you plow ahead because I'm going to do this, this, and this, and sometimes you're a little hesitant. I'll throw a little bit here and see, is that right? Is that the right color? Is that the right shade here? And that, like, I don't know. And the movie captures all of that, I think, brilliantly.
Yeah. Yeah. I also just love the, so I'm scrolling through pictures of the from the movie to think about
That's
about
my favorite
the visuals.
thing to do while podcasting now, by the way. Is just sitting here with IMDb open and scrolling through the photos.
Well, it can help a lot. So but like the reason I mention it is kind of what you were just saying about like a big part of the movie is Marianne is looking at staring at really Eloise, and it's always and Eloise is catching her doing it and not really sure what to make of it. And it's and then eventually there she's like, well, okay, it's because I'm supposed to paint you, and there's some disappointment there because it's like, oh, it's not because you were just staring at me. But then also I think in the subtlety of the scene they're able to convey like, oh no, it is because I was just staring at you also.
Yeah.
But also I think there's another fun layer, which is like studying someone with the eye of an artist kind of is almost the same thing as falling in love with them, or like something like studying someone with intensity is a way of falling in love with them, you could say.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is just a kind of a feeling or a thought I was having while watching the movie is
Yeah, no,
how,
that's
yeah, how these things are related.
That's well said, because I think that ties back to what you said about the original painting not capturing the soul of the person, right? That's kind
Hmm.
of almost what you have to do a good portrait, is to capture the essential soul of the person. And to do that, you have to study and kind of understand that soul. And as she did that, she fell in love with it. Yeah, I do love that moment where it's like, oh, there was an excuse for you to be staring at me like that this whole time. Bummer. But then it escalates from there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it all just comes together really well. Like I think this is a very sharply written story. Like it's just very well put together.
Yeah.
And on top of being beautifully shot and composed, like it's so French too. Sometimes like, man, I'm not always in the mood for French cinema, but like sometimes you just really want to sit down and like watch a really fucking French movie, and this is just like a really French movie in every way, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I guess I haven't watched a lot of French movies, but yeah, it definitely struck me as being pretty French.
So what did you think? There's a recurring image throughout the movie of kind of Marianne kind of wandering through the house and then like seeing Eloise in what we see later is her bridal gown, almost like ghost like, standing in the middle of the hallway. What was your kind of read on that whole thing?
I mean, I think there's more to it than this, but I interpreted it as a successful three beat building up to the moment where she is actually standing there in her wedding gown
Mm-hmm.
and says, "Turn around." Which, we basically said this a minute ago, but she pauses for like a full second before she actually turns around, because I think it's like she's thinking, if I turn around, then that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really saying goodbye, because we both understand that this is the Orpheus thing. this
Yeah,
is
yeah,
this is what we're doing. And then she turns around and she sees her, and and it's the image that has been foreshadowed, that I believe 2 previous times.
yes,
So I mean, yes, narratively that's what it is. Does it have some other spiritual meaning beyond that? Is it a premonition of some kind? I, I don't know. Sure.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think you're spot on with that, and I think that you kind of maybe, or I didn't realize it at the time that was her in a wedding gown. Like it just looks like just a bunch of white clothing. Like it almost could look like she's supposed to be a ghost. And
Yeah.
I remember distinctly the first time watching this, I was like, oh, is this supposed to be like the ghost of her older sister that just looks a lot like her, that's kind of hovering over it
Okay.
all? I don't think that's it, but I do think it is kind of the inevitability of her coming marriage, and her
Uh-huh.
like being reminded of it, like it just the spirit of the inevitable end of this whole thing is haunting the house, because she's going to get married to this guy. That's why you're here, is to paint this painting. That is the thing you are making for her is the tool of her being lost to you forever. And so it's just like she turns around the corner and there she is, and she's beautiful and everything you want, but also she's wearing the wedding gown that is the symbol of you losing her.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's totally it. And I think, I mean, at some point, like maybe the first time in the movie, I may have seen it as a kind of like, oh, it's a premonition that she's going to die and it's like a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think by the second time, I wasn't really thinking that anymore.
And I think that's a fair thing to get to, because they do like lay the groundwork with her sister committed suicide by these cliffs. Like she chose to jump off these cliffs, and we have Eloise like going to these cliffs multiple times. Like there is a version of the story, I think, where you can see her choosing a way out through suicide, like her sister. It doesn't go
Yeah.
that way, and again, I'm glad that nothing like that happens. I'm glad that this is just, we had our time together, and then it's very sad, and we'll remember each other forever.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I feel like by the end of the movie, I'm like, no, there's no way she ever would have committed suicide. But at the time, before you know her character, you're
Yeah.
like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe, who knows? Um, you don't know her yet.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the joys of the movie, is getting to know these characters who are so consistently drawn and so deep. Um,
Mm-hmm. And I love, speaking of like the power of the portraits in this, like that final portrait that she makes of her is perfect. That look on her face is this look of incredible defiance. Like I actually can't believe the mom looked at that portrait and was like, yeah, this is the one that's going to make him want to marry you. Like
uh-huh.
it is a look that says, I don't want to marry you.
Yeah,
I don't like this. Even like just the choice of how she has her arm kind of not in her lap, but like up,
yeah,
resting on that thing, is just like this look of like, fuck you, defiance that
exactly.
captures the character perfectly. But like, yeah, I remember the first time I was watching, I was waiting for the mom to be like, what the hell is this? We can't send this to this guy. We're trying to
I
get him
think,
to fall in love with you.
yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I think the key is that it's just subtle enough,
Yeah.
um, that it's acceptable while still capturing her personality,
Yeah. Well,
accurately.
and part of me wonders if like the point here is that like we've gotten to know her really well over the course of this movie, just like Marianne has, but nobody else understands her this way, and so they just, even her mother, just don't see it. They just don't
Yeah.
see that in there. They just, oh, it's just a picture of her, because we don't think of her at any deep level beyond the surface. What does her face look like?
Yeah. I'm speaking of the painting in general, I'm just sort of charmed at how much like fan art there is for this movie, much of which is quite delightful. I'm just going to share this one picture I found with you that I really like, which is for the listeners, just the moment where Eloise catches Marianne staring at her on the beach, and somebody has like drawn it, and it's just such a great, it highlights I think how visually well done the movie is, that you can
Mhm.
just sort of like take the actual frame and then just like draw it, and it's like, oh, that's a beautiful piece of art right there.
Yeah.
There's kind of a lot of this kind of stuff that I'm seeing as I scroll around.
Yeah, this was, I think that's a great way of transitioning to one of my most fascinating things about this movie is this is this is 30 on the uh, BFI list of top 100 films from 2022. 30. That's really high up there, man. I think it is like in the top 50. It's like the newest one. To be that high up, like to be a 2019 movie. This listing was put together in 2022, which, I mean, you could say recency bias, right? You could say this movie was on everyone's minds when they were doing this thing, but like it was not like the poll came out the year the movie came out that you could argue recency bias.
Yeah, I don't know how to think about that. I mean, I agree, it's kind of cool. It's is this the most recent one on the entire uh
It on the entire
list?
top 100, it might be.
Yeah, because I mean, I remember I looked over the list. I don't remember seeing anything newer, but my memory isn't right.
Parasite is on this list also, and that came out the same year. So
Okay.
I think yeah, but Parasite is 90th on the list. This is 30. So yeah, I mean, I think this is an incredibly powerful movie that affected people very deeply, and like you watch the movie, and I think you understand why. It's not as if it's not as if stories like this have never been told before. Like obviously, love stories, like unrequited love stories, like we just talked about. In the Mood for Love is another one of these stories, and I don't think it's just because it's two women. That's like the saying the novelty of it sounds so dismissive and rude, but like we've done the story 100 times before with a man and a woman, but now we're doing it with two women, and that's why it's so well regarded. It's like I'm trying to think of a way to phrase this that doesn't seem dismissive. Like it almost sometimes doesn't even matter that they're two women. Like
Yeah.
of course it does, because like that it's all the exploring what it was like to be a woman and what it is like to be a woman is so key to this movie. But like I don't know, there's just something like this is just a love story. It's not like it never feels like we're doing a lesbian love story. Like,
Yeah.
I think the thing I fall back on always is those Tamsin Muir books we read. God, what are they called?
The Locked Tomb books.
Yeah. Where the back of the book says like lesbian space, like that it's like,
Necromancers.
yeah, it just like they were like push, like it's just this is just it's just a love story. And yes, they happen to be two women, and that's because the director is a gay woman, and she wanted to write a movie about two women falling in love, and that's it. I don't know. Am I being like dismissive here? I don't know. There's just something.
No, I mean, I wasn't thinking about the we're doing a it's this, it's countercultural. It's like, no, this is it literally is just trying to earnestly portray this true emotionally resonant, vulnerable thing. And I, as a man, had no trouble connecting with it, and I didn't feel like, oh, this isn't for me. It was great. I loved it. I think exactly the way I was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't seem particularly relevant one way or the other. I think the Locked Tomb thing is like the most annoying aspect of that is that the like the romance element of those stories is actually far like less important to the story than the romance in this movie is. And yet it's like central to the marketing of those books.
To be 100% clear here, I'm not complaining about those books a lot that I really enjoy. I'm complaining about the marketing of those books that really try to bill it as this specific thing. And I do think maybe it's because this is not a movie about these two people in love trying to make it work in secret in a world that is not tolerant of them. Like that's not what the story actually is. There's no moment of like, you two can't be two women being together. No, not in my, like, there's never any of those moments. It's just simply a story about two people in love. They just happen to be women.
Yeah. And I think it's important that they're like, I have no idea how old these actresses are, but like they're old enough to know know the way the world is.
Mm-hmm.
So and that matters, I think, to the story, because you're right that there's not the scene where the mom catches them and is like, you will never see her again, and then the girl weeps, and it's like, no, they already know that. They already know this has no future. There doesn't need to be that scene because they already know all of that, and it's actually, it's a very mature, realistic, sober kind of love and romance, which I think is even more rare, because I think there's a tendency, especially in like American, like Hollywood films, to have love stories be about people who are young and stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's the drama of it, is like, they're young and stupid. What are they going to do? They're going to do something stupid because they're young, and that's how young people are. And there's tons of drama to be mined there. And there's tons of great movies that basically follow this. But like, it is kind of like nice and refreshing to see two, still young, but slightly world weary people be like, okay, we kind of know how this is going to go, but we just feel so strongly that we can't stop ourselves. That's cool. I like that.
I like that too. And again, I think this is another place in which it lines up perfectly within the mood for love, because these are two married older people that that know exactly what this thing can and can't be, and desperately try anyway, but with that knowledge, it doesn't even need to be stated by the movie that there's no way this thing could possibly work out.
Right.
But we're gonna enjoy it while we can. We're gonna have our summer vacation on our magic island.
Yeah, that was a nice island. I want to check that island out.
Where's Brittany?
I don't know.
Where's Brittany?
Brittany.
It's in France, obviously.
Yeah, I guess it's I guess it's not an island. It's like a state, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they were on an island in that region of France.
Okay. Yeah,
we're definitely on an island.
I don't know. I don't know anything about France. I'm an American. Don't know anything about France. Don't want to know anything about France.
Don't want to know any. All right. Everything I know about France, I've learned through their movies, which is surely an accurate depiction of all French people.
Yeah, it's just like Hollywood is a perfectly accurate depiction of Americans.
Now that happens to be true, though.
Well, we're very self-obsessed as a people, so we do like to make movies about ourselves. So I guess that's not entirely off base.
Yeah. I guess the last thing I want to say is just once again harping on that 2.5 minute end of the movie. Like, I left this movie and I was like, I need to listen to Vivaldi again, and I just booted up the Four Seasons and listened to them all the way through, which is just wonderful. And now I've on the nights that my wife is putting our son to bed and I'm on baby duty, taking care of her while she's doing that, I just sit us down and I put classical music on to help calm her down, and I've enjoyed the shit out of it. So if after everything this movie did for me, just emotionally, like also doing that was just great. It was just
That's
great.
delightful. That's delightful.
I do want to say though, if I go to a show that's playing Vivaldi's The Four Seasons, and I sit down in my chair and the curtain opens and they start with the last 2.5 minutes of Summer, I'm probably going to be like, hey, what's going on here?
I feel like the movie is relying on you to not know the Four Seasons well enough to have noticed that.
So, hey, wait a minute. Doesn't it start with spring normally?
No,
and
we
also,
don't have time
even
for that.
if you do start with summer, isn't this like 8 minutes into the piece?
No time for that shit. We're skipping. This is speed run.
We're gonna skip over autumn because no one cares about that one. Go straight into winter.
Yeah, there you go. It's great. Perfect.
Anything else you want to say about Portrait of a Lady on Fire?
Nope.
Yeah, I think the one thing I just as we're wrapping up, I just remembered the whole Vus and two thing we were talking about right before we started. One of those things that like I think this movie works very well as just us reading subtitles from a French movie, but there is always stuff that's a little lost. And one of the things I saw when looking up information about this movie was that the entire movie they use the formal vous, which is like the formal two in French. The Spanish have this as well. It's vosotros, where it's like a more formal way of saying you. They use that through the entire movie, and then at the very end of the movie, in the scene we talked about, where she asks her to turn around, and she does turn around. That is the first and only time she uses the more informal version of you, and it's I think supposed to represent this idea of them, a last ditch plea where that's putting off all pretense and is like acknowledging how close and personal they are together.
Yeah, sure. I love it. Yeah. And that's not something that I obviously caught or could have caught, or even once you explain it to me, I still can only sort of just nod and take your word for it because I don't know the full connotations of informal versus formal French.
Yeah, I mean, pronouns, basically, it's just like if there was another word for you, but in English the word was like yo or something, just like buddy or something, where you wouldn't. It's just a word that you wouldn't use for someone in like a professional situation where I just met you. You wouldn't be that buddy with someone. And so there's just a different way to there's a different verb to use and different conjugation type to use when you're talking to someone formally versus informally.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do understand, but also at the same time, I think if I have a point here, it's just that there are subtleties that are highly specific and connotations that are highly specific that cannot be translated. Like because it's not, if I were to be like, oh yeah, it's like saying you all instead of y'all, it's like, well, not really. like it's similar, but it's probably not really like, because it's not like she said y'all. That's not correct, right? It's a difference that we don't quite have, right? It's not. Right, it's also not the difference of like yourself versus you. It's just not it's not a thing that we have. So I can like intellectually get what you're saying when you describe it to me, but it's just cool. It's cool to watch foreign things. I love to watch foreign things, but I also like to remain aware that I am just not understanding it the way a native person would understand it, and that's fine.
That's always going to happen, even in books. Like, translation is really, really good, but it's not perfect, and it's always going to have to change and morph things around in order to work in the other language. Now I want us to make a movie where the movie is about a woman refusing to admit that she is a Texan. And then at the very end of the movie, she uses y'all. and no foreigner would understand the significance of that moment.
Well, she's saying goodbye to her lover for the final time. She says, "Y'all take care now."
So stupid. Oh, someone make it happen. All right. That is a perfect way to end our conversation about Portrait of a Lady on Fire, a very beautiful, very wonderful movie that I'm glad I got to revisit, and I'm glad you got to watch, Matt. I think this is one of the great things about this this Patreon program we have, where I don't know if you would have ever sat down and watched this movie if it wasn't for our friend Chris asking you to.
Probably not. I honestly thought that the Portrait of a Lady on Fire was a portrait. Not a movie. So thank you for educating me.
Speaking of translations, apparently the literal French translation of this movie is Portrait of a Young Girl on Fire.
Okay.
And the theory is, when it was put into English, the title Portrait of a Lady on Fire was meant to echo the Henry James novel, The Portrait of a Lady.
Oh, okay. That kind of makes sense. Also, I feel like French has like mademoiselle as like a word, whereas the young woman has, again, speaking of connotations, kind of a different connotation from just like mademoiselle as a word,
I do think like young woman would have been in English doesn't quite work.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but wonderful movie. Thank you so much, Chris, for having us watch and talk about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Doof. All right, Matt, let's move on to the news. The biggest thing that actually just happened a couple hours before we sat down to record tonight is the strike is over. Officially.
Yeah.
It's done.
For real this time, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so what happened here, by the way, is the writer's strike ended, like a month ago. I think it was while we were on our break for my baby, and we didn't really ever talk about it because by the time we came back doing podcasts, it was like old news that the writer's strike was over, and so we didn't talk about it on the show or anything. But the writer's strike ended, and the assumption was that, okay, now that the studios have agreed to the writers' demands, the actors' demands are pretty close to them, and so we were going to be seeing a resolution of the SAG-AFTRA strike pretty quickly. Of course, that didn't happen because it's now November, and November 8th is the date that this thing finally ends. There was a lot of still disagreement going on between the guild and the studios that finally got resolved. We don't yet, at the time of this recording, know what the official deal is yet because they just reached a tentative agreement. They announced that they reached a tentative agreement, and then I think as of midnight tonight, the agreement will move to the actual guild for the members to vote on, and that's when we will actually, until that happens, we won't actually get to see like the full scope of the deal. But SAG, of course, is advertising what they got. They're calling it a contract valued at over $1 billion. That includes above pattern minimum compensation increases, unprecedented provisions for consent and compensation that will protect members from the threat of AI, and for the first time establishing a streaming participation bonus. So these were the reason they're saying this is because these were the three big sticking points. And apparently the sticking point that kept things going for longer than everyone anticipated was the second one, was AI related. So basically, my understanding of this was the SAG-AFTRA really wanted some sort of contracted protection for consent of using an actor's image through any kind of, artificial intelligence to create a person thing. Um, and I don't know the details of why the studio was saying no to that specific thing, but they were arguing about this a lot. So presumably the deal has some sort of thing that requires consent by the actor to use their image in any kind of AI modeling going forward. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm impressed that they were able to get the concessions that they were able to get on AI. I actually think this is a pretty cool model to use going forward for other industries in terms of protecting people against just complete replacement, because this way humans can still use the fruits of AI, which are going to be incredibly valuable over, the remainder of our existence for the next 10 years at least. But being able to say, like, you have to employ me and I have to be the one who uses the AI. That's a great idea. Like, I was like, wow, that's cleverer than I would have thought they would have been. And the fact that they pulled it off is quite inspiring and a great precedent to set, actually. That's more, that was more on the writing side, actually, but it also applies. It also applies on the the likeness side, because really, I think that the studio knows that we're not that far away from being able to have fully convincing, fully synthetic Tom Cruise, and they can just crank out Tom Cruise movies forever with CGI Tom Cruise. And that's going to be a reality. And so now they can't just do that and not have to pay Tom Cruise anything.
Yeah. I agree. Like, both with what the writers got and with this, I think it's really encouraging that people seem to understand and get that this technology is here and it's only going to get better and better and better.
Right.
And so, like, I felt like when the strike first started, the tone around what the writers were saying to garner public support was, we have to stop AI. And I was always in my head just like, well, you're definitely not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So I agree. Like, this agreement on both sides seems to be like, this is a thing. It's going to continue to be a thing. It's going to get better and better and better at what it does. So what we as a guild are going to do is we're going to draw out a basic set of rules and requirements for how you, the studios, handle this thing with us. And it's going, with the writer side, they basically said, you can use AI, but it's us that uses it, not you. Ha. Yeah. And then, the actors are like, no, you have to pay me. If you use my face, even if it's a computer making my face, I get asked and I get paid, which is great. It's very great.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's, I was watching a thing about, actually, I think it was about Andor. And it was like, they were talking about the editing techniques that they used for Andor. And I was actually slightly scandalized by how involved the editing techniques were. Because it wasn't, when I say editing techniques, I don't just mean like, they cut it together in a certain way. It's like the editor being like, well, I really like the way that her face kind of dipped into the frame in this shot. But then I really liked how this other character's face looked more afraid in this shot. And so I mixed them together and I made a new shot that was never actually on camera.
Yep.
That has elements from these other two shots that were made. And then I maybe shifted her face down a little bit because I thought that looked better. And I was like, holy shit. So like that never actually happened. You assembled that shot out of a variety of things that you then tweaked carefully. And the thing is, it turned out great. I love that show, obviously, but I was a little I don't know, disconcerted. And then you mix AI into it. Pretty soon you're going to be able to say, I didn't really like her facial expression there, so I'm just going to turn this dial in my editing software and make it 32% more angry. Yeah, that looks good. That's totally going to be a thing in like 5 years. Yeah. And it's kind of important that you not be able to just say like, and therefore it's not the same actor anymore and I don't have to pay them.
Yeah. No, I agree. And my gut reaction to hear you saying that was concern because, like, yeah, I agree. I love that show. At what point does it stop being actors? Like, this is all so terrifying.
Uh-huh.
That this technology exists. I mean, Google is advertising a phone right now that does that with pictures, right? Like, you can take a series of pictures, and if
Yeah.
you like person A's smile in picture B, but everyone else in picture uh in the other picture is better, you can just move his face over to that new picture. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that's not a picture anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
that doesn't exist. That thing you took there
That's
doesn't exist
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the funny thing is people may not know this, but even just normal pictures you take with an iPhone are sort of like AI reconstituted by
Yeah.
default,
Oh
like
yeah.
already,
Uh-huh.
and you don't notice it because it's in ways that the human eye is not really good at distinguishing. But if you had like a physical photograph to compare it to, you would notice all kinds of little subtle differences. Just for reference, the scene I was talking about was literally the interrogation where Daedra is interrogating Bix, which is like
Jesus.
one of the best sequences of the show, and learning how much sort of artifice went into it. I was like a combination of like impressed and a little, like I said, scandalized. Like, oh,
Yeah.
so that's where we are now, you know. And again, that's not even AI. That's just talking about how good we are at I mean, it sort of is AI. It sort of is AI because it's using tooling to like very quickly sort of like snip like a moving person out of a
Yeah.
scene and paste them into another scene where they weren't, which is not it's not easy algorithmically. Like it's not something we probably were good at doing until pretty recently. It's kind of AI adjacent. It's kind of borderline.
Yeah, and it's just only going to get better and
Yeah,
easier. That,
yeah,
like, you're absolutely right that instead of needing a person to manual do that, you can just say, "Hey, do this," and
right,
it'll be done.
right.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing that has always bothered me, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. There was another example recently of it where, like, Disney on one of their, like, crappy straight to Disney Plus released movies, like, used AI to be the crowd in a basketball game, and it was awful. Like, it was really bad. Like, it just, like, if you zoom in and pay attention to any of these AI constructed people, they look like shit. And,
Uh-huh.
like, everyone's snarky and laughing about it. And it just, like, once again reiterate, this is the worst this technology is ever going to be.
Right.
Like, it's going to get better and better and better. So yeah, we can be snarky about the things that it's bad at right now, but, like, that's fixable and will be fixed very quickly. So, like, we have to do something. We have to at least make rules about what the world is going to look like. And I think it is really encouraging that the the both of the guilds, writers and actors guild, were able to, like, stick to their guns about this and really approach the issue with the honesty that they needed to get something for protection for their people. It's great.
Yeah. No, it's a surprisingly positive outcome. You know,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I feel like now that I kind of know a little bit more about the fact that the writers were satisfied but the actors weren't. I wonder if the strategy with the studio side wasn't basically to say, all right, we'll drive a wedge between these two groups by satisfying one of them, and then they'll be like, all right, let's, you know, good, we got what we wanted, let's go back to work. And the other
Yeah.
side, the actors will not be happy, but the writers will be like, hey, like our people haven't gotten paid for months. Can we move this along and start pressuring them? It
Yeah.
sounds like it sounds like that's not what happened. It sounds like they held the line.
I mean, there was definitely some, like, I think public perception in this stuff is so important, and that's why
Mhm.
both sides were kind of negotiating through the press, even though they're technically not supposed to do that.
Uh-huh.
But, like, just the idea that, one side has, like, finished and got a deal, the studio can then position itself as the reasonable one, right? Like, look, the writers asked for all this stuff, we were able to deal with them. So if we can't make a deal with the actors, it must be the actors' fault. So they were able to kind of successfully position that. But I think the thing that SAG did is they kind of held strong and weren't allowed to be pressured into cutting a deal that they didn't want because of that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it feels like we're in a situation where everybody wins. Obviously, the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about was what happens now, because we're in the beginning of November. This deal will be voted on, I think, within the next 48 hours or so. Presumably people will go back to work. But the thing about Hollywood is most productions basically shut down after Thanksgiving for the year, right? They work to the Thanksgiving holiday, and then basically the rest of December, there's not a lot of filming going on in Hollywood anymore until January. So basically, nothing's going to be picked up probably until the new year, and that puts us in a situation where like next year could be really bad. It could be really bad for film and for TV, because all this stuff has been pushed and pushed and pushed. I mean, we've already seen a bunch of stuff that was supposed to come out next year pushed. The Mission Impossible movie that was supposed to come out next year is now coming out in 2025. Also, no longer being called Dead Reckoning Part 2. Like all this stuff is happening, and part of this is me kind of wondering, what does the entertainment landscape even look like after this? Because streaming is not working anymore. Like basically what happened was, and we've talked about this before, but interest rates were really low for a long time, and borrowing money was really cheap. And so all of these big rich companies could basically borrow infinity money at ridiculously low rates and use it to fund lots and lots of projects. Well, that's not the case anymore. And all the bills are coming due, and nobody has any money, and everyone's freaking out. DC just put a bunch of their shit on Netflix. They have their own streaming service. It's called Max. But like all the DCEU movies are on Netflix now. Because everyone's just desperate to get as much money as possible. Apparently Disney's in negotiations with Netflix right now to put a bunch of their shit on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's like there is this thing is happening right now where all this stuff is starting to break down, and strike or no strike, like I don't know what this landscape looks like in a few years, especially since all of the streaming services have raised their price this year. I got an email from Max last week that was like, we're not raising your price, don't worry. Oh, but also you don't get 4K streaming anymore. We just took that away from you. You it's gone. You can get it if you want, but you need to do the ultimate plan now. And so it's like none of these models work anymore. And I am an insane person that watches an insane amount of TV, and I justify it by having this podcast where I occasionally talk about that TV with you. If I was just like a normal person, I would be canceling I would be priced out of so many of these services. Like Apple Plus, which I love, just doubled their price. They were $5 a month, which is an incredibly reasonable price for a library that is just not as extensive as any of the little libraries, because it just has their stuff on it. And they just doubled it to $10 a month. Yeah. Is it worth $10 a month? I don't think so.
No. I think we're watching like the next stage of this thing where they basically try to squeeze, which is my word for you raise the price enormously, and you gamble that when you double the price, you're not going to lose half of your subscribers. You're going to lose less than half of your subscribers, and thus you make money on net. And that works for a bit until you have squeezed out everyone, or you've squeezed out you've squeezed out so many people that you actually can't sustain anymore. You start declining. And I have no idea what's going to happen. It's so crazy that like 4K has been a thing for how many years now? Like the idea that they're basically sort of nickel and diming us over bandwidth. I'm like, I thought we were like past this. I thought it was just, we figured out how to do it cheaply, and we can do it now. And it's like, maybe that was never true. Maybe they were always sort of like gambling, subsidizing our streaming quality on the back of some notion of like, we're going to lock in the whole ecosystem, and then we're going to have an economy of scale, and then it's going to make sense. But obviously it doesn't make sense now. Well, obviously we're hemorrhaging money now, but it'll make sense later. And then it just never actually worked out for anyone because they all competed themselves into the ground. I don't actually know. The fact that they're never transparent about any of this stuff makes it impossible to figure out. But it is fascinating to watch this train wreck that has been playing out in slow motion over the last several years.
Yeah. I mean, we talked for a while, a year or so ago, about how I kind of was estimating there being some sort of consolidation happening, where these big companies start buying each other out. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I think some of these companies are just going to get out of this business. I mean, I still think they're going to probably produce original content, but I don't think they're going to host their own platform anymore.
Mm.
And the wild thing to me is, I think we were singing the death knells of Netflix like a year ago. Netflix has come out of this whole thing great. Their subscriber numbers are up. Everyone's wanting to come to the table with them to sell them more content. Like, Netflix has positioned themselves to win this whole thing, and they were winning at the beginning too. And then everything else, all these other things happened, and we were all talking about, oh, the death of Netflix, blah 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 blah. But no, man, they're great. They're doing fine.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I like they had Dune on there the other day, and I was like, oh yeah, Dune.
Yeah,
I'll watch Dune again, and I watched Dune again, and it was great. And it's the first time I've watched Netflix in a bit. So,
and they're going to continue to do this, like we said. Like, all the the Batman's going to be on there. All the DC stuff's going to be on there.
yeah.
Who know, like, they already have a deal with Sony, who has never really gotten into the streaming thing, just has like a standing deal with Netflix, where every movie they release after the theatrical run and after a certain window will just be on Netflix. So I think the Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse movie just hit Netflix just recently, and they always do well there. Like, they always do really well there. It's like people after 30 streaming services and thousands of dollars spent, Netflix is still, for the majority of Americans and people around the world, like, the place you go for streaming stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's cool, and it's interesting, and it's surprising. I mean, I think this kind of contradicts all that, but I was gonna predict, and maybe I kind of still do predict, that like the reconsolidation is gonna favor the companies that actually own the fiber, because they have a revenue model that kind of makes intrinsic sense, which is like, we're gonna charge you a bunch of money for your cable, for your internet, and by the way, we'll also will also be the streaming service. Like that makes some amount of sense, in no small part because that's literally how it was for decades previously. Yeah. And it kind of makes sense that maybe the center of gravity might shift back in that direction, but it might look quite different. It might look more like sort of weird, complicated partnerships between streaming companies like Netflix and fiber companies. I don't know. I don't.
Well,
know.
That's like the weird thing is that I think AT&T saw that as well and was trying to do that, and that's why they bought Warner Brothers and like, we're doing all this HBO Max stuff. But they got the fuck out of that business. And actually now they look like the geniuses for getting the fuck out of the business when they did. Like, I think at the time everyone was like, wait, you bought this company and then sold it for a loss like 5 years later? And it's because someone at that company read the writing on the wall and said, we got to get the fuck out of this thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's all really fascinating to me, and I'm really kind of just curious what this all looks like a year from now. I mean, the cynic in me is saying that all these companies are just doing exactly what I said they were going to be doing a bit ago, which is they introduce this lower priced commercial tier, and then they raise the prices of the non-commercial tier to try to push people to the commercial tier because they make more money off those subs than they do off people just paying a flat amount per month. Which could be exactly what they're doing. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I don't know.
I know these companies are all desperate and not making a lot of money. And it's just a really interesting time. I don't know what the streaming world is going to look like a year from now, 2 years from now. And I think it's great that, actors and writers like at least got these companies to agree that when shows are big, when they're hits, they get a portion of the massive amounts of money they're making on this stuff. But gosh, I don't even know if the industry is going to look like this in a couple years anyway, and they're going to have to renegotiate something entirely new on some entirely new content delivery service. I don't know.
I mean, I'm almost sure that it won't look the same in a couple of years. And it's very difficult to predict how, because I don't think I don't think it would be really interesting to go back and collate the conversations you and I have had over the years, because we've been talking about this for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I actually, other than the fact that we record these conversations, I don't tend to like check whether my predictions were right on this. So AI, go do that for me.
There you go. It comes full circle.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting few years for sure. I think it's a sad state of affairs when I look at this and be like, man, you know what I miss? Cable. Paying one company a lot of money, sure, but I mean, comparatively these days, a similar amount of money just divided up between multiple companies instead of one. And then they just handle the negotiation between themselves and the content producers, and I just watch the stuff. I like that. Can we do that again?
Yeah. I would like it if it were easier. Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, we will, as always, continue to watch this whole situation closely and figure out where things are going from here.
All right.
Matt, are you going to go watch the Marvels this weekend?
No, because I'm on vacation this weekend. But maybe taking my kids to it next weekend.
Are they excited to see it? Do they even know what's coming out?
They're not. They're not excited because they're not excited about Marvel right now. And I think I said this before, but like they used to be like. But it was funny. We were driving like literally earlier today, and they were just totally ragging on Wakanda Forever. And I was actually just keeping quiet because I was like, I don't think this is just like my opinion that they're parroting. I think they just didn't like the movie, and they're just really ragging on it, really going hard. I thought that was kind of funny. And I was like, well, we could go see the Marvels. And they're like, no, it's been bad ever since Iron Man died. And I'm like, yeah, well, that was my opinion that I said. Yeah, I am kind of interested. I'm kind of like, I want to give him this one last chance,
Yeah. Yeah, I want to go see it. I won't be seeing it this weekend for baby reasons, but I'll see it eventually for sure. And I'm tentatively excited. Like I liked Captain Marvel, I think, more than you. I like Brie Larson as an actress.
Yeah.
Even though if I'm just not entirely sure she's well cast in that role, but I like Brie Larson. The Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, like I liked the first half of her show, which seems to be the theme with a lot of these Marvel shows. So I like her as a character. So yeah, it could be good. I don't know.
Yeah, could be.
You know, it's not good.
What?
Loki.
I haven't watched any of Loki. I've been waiting for somebody to give me a read on it.
It's bad. Like, okay. I don't know. Like, is it a disaster? No, it's not a disaster. But it's not good. And I actually feel really bad about this because Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead are two sci-fi directors that did direct like a lot of original sci-fi films that I really liked. They directed a movie called Spring, a movie called The Endless, a movie called Synchronic, like movies that I really, really liked. And they kind of have hitched their wagon to this Marvel thing. Like they directed a few episodes of Moon Knight, and then they've, I think, collectively directed 4 of the 6 episodes of Loki, season 2 at least. And man, their episodes look so good. Like I love the way they shoot these things, but the show's so bad. And it makes me sad because like I don't fault them for like, hey, we've made all these independent science fiction movies that not very many people see, and we're struggling to get these movies that we want to make made, and here's this big billion-dollar company offering us a lot of money to direct their stuff for. Like I'm not chastising them for their decision, but it makes me sad that like they're putting all this wonderful work into things that I think are just kind of incredibly messy and aren't working at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they're getting their ticket punched and it'll all pay off in the end.
Maybe it will. I don't know. I didn't mean to talk about that. I just had to rant about Loki because
sure,
The new episode's coming out soon, and I'm gonna have to watch it.
That's interesting.
All right. I think that is it for us for today. If you have any opinions on the writer strike, the actor strike, or the future of streaming, or if you just want to let us know what you thought of Portrait of a Lady on Fire, you can always reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on our Twitter account at doofmedia, or on our subreddit r/doofmedia, where you will find a post for this very episode. What?
No, that's exactly correct.
It just took me a while to get there.
Yeah.
And you know what I hate about X?
What?
Speaking of Twitter, I don't really care about the name thing. I think it's a silly thing to do, to take away entire brand recognition of this thing that everyone knows. But I hate that it took away the headlines from the stories that are linked on there now.
It's very silly.
I hate it.
It's very, very silly. And like, I'm almost certain that they did it because they tried it and then they saw that people were clicking on the images out of sheer confusion.
Yeah.
And then they interpreted that as, oh, people like this more. And then they just went with it instead of realizing, like, no, people just don't understand what they're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I'll see someone, you're scrolling through Twitter, you see someone post a story. Like, I'm so conditioned to click on things that look like stories because they have headlines on them. And like, I was literally looking through, and like, today was the Marvel's embargo drop, so people were able to post their reviews of Marvels, and I would like see people posting all these pictures of the Marvels movie, and like, I wouldn't realize, oh, that's a link to his review. That's his review of the movie.
Oh god. Perfect.
It's just, it's terrible. Anyway, sorry. Another rant I had to get in. I don't care about changing the name to X. I don't really care. I think it's stupid, but I don't care. But this whole it's so dumb.
They're gonna roll it back at some point.
Well, what people are actually doing now, Matt, is they are not posting a link. They're posting a picture and then just putting the link in the tweet itself, because then you can at least just look at the link or look at the tweet and see there's a link. Oh, yeah. This is a news article.
Yeah.
I got
it. I will consciously and knowingly click on a link instead of who knows what this is.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen that as well. Yeah.
Awful. Anyway, Continue with the outro.
Well, anyway, if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on any and all of the major podcasting platforms.
And you can find this and all of our shows over at doofmedia.com. Also, if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and support at any available level. This very show is only possible thanks to the incredibly generous donation of our patron, Chris P. Chris, thank you so much for your support. And once again, thanks for making us watch this really excellent movie.
Yeah. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we have another Doof Canon episode lined up. I haven't sent out the poll for that yet, so I can't tell you what movie it's going to be, but it's going to be a movie.
Hell yeah. Love those.
We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.